The morning fog still clung to the streets of New York. As the city slowly stirred to life, cars moved sluggishly through the crowded avenues. And amidst this quiet chaos, Lauren Mitchell's sleek black SUV glided past a patrol car. As she noticed the flash of headlights behind her, she knew a routine traffic stop was likely ahead. But what she didn't realize was that this simple encounter would change her life forever. Officer Jason Carter, a seasoned veteran of the police force, spotted the luxury vehicle ahead of him. With a casual glance, he noticed the driver was alone and decided it was the perfect opportunity to assert his authority. He stepped out of his car, his chest puffed up with self-importance. His confidence oozed as he walked toward the SUV, the glint of arrogance in his eyes. "Is this your car, or did you borrow it?" Carter asked coldly, his hand resting on his belt, exuding an air of superiority. "Let me see your papers." Lauren, unbothered, adjusted her sunglasses as she looked ahead, avoiding his gaze. "I'm Lauren Mitchell. I'm on my way to an important meeting. Please make it quick," she replied, her tone calm yet firm, a hint of challenge in her words. Carter's pride flared. He had dealt with people like her before, rich, entitled, and dismissive. His smile faltered into irritation as her dismissive tone pushed his buttons. Without missing a beat, he moved closer to her car, his body language becoming more aggressive. But Lauren didn't flinch. She remained seated, calm and composed, sensing that what was about to unfold couldn't be undone. Carter, growing more agitated, leaned in closer to the window and, without warning, spat directly in her face. The silence that followed was deafening. The young officer standing beside Carter froze in shock, unsure of what to do. Carter, however, believed his actions had achieved their desired result. He smiled, thinking the woman would be humiliated and powerless, just like countless others who had been subjected to his abuse of authority. But Lauren didn't respond with anger or screams. Instead, she wiped her face with a tissue, calmly and without saying a word. Carter's smile grew wider, convinced he had broken her. Without hesitation, Lauren took out her phone and made a call. Carter, still oblivious to the gravity of the situation, sneered, thinking it was just another futile attempt to intimidate him. "Good luck with that," he muttered under his breath. But his confidence quickly turned to confusion when the unmistakable sound of sirens cut through the air. He turned to see a black car with internal affairs plates pull up behind them. His smile vanished instantly, replaced by a creeping sense of dread. Lauren, with an icy calm, looked at him and said, "I'm Judge Lauren Mitchell, and I'm in charge of investigating police misconduct in this city. Congratulations. You are about to be the star of my next trial." The words hit Carter like a ton of bricks. His entire demeanor shifted from arrogance to panic. And for the first time, he realized the mistake he had just made. Everything he had worked for was about to unravel. As the internal affairs officers took over the situation, the city, unaware of what had transpired, was about to witness a scandal that would rock the very foundation of the local police force. What began as a routine traffic stop had just transformed into a much larger battle for justice. And Lauren Mitchell was prepared to make sure the truth was exposed. The next few hours were a blur for Jason Carter. The feeling of invincibility he had carried with him for years had evaporated in an instant, leaving behind only the stark reality of his mistake. As he was escorted into the internal affairs building, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what was happening to him. What was supposed to be a routine encounter, an easy way for him to remind someone of their place, had turned into a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. Lauren Mitchell, on the other hand, stood outside the building, her composure unwavering. She was used to pressure, to standing alone in the face of adversity. But today felt different. This wasn't just about one officer crossing the line. This was a chance to bring down a system that had protected its own for too long. Inside the building, Carter was placed in an interrogation room, his hands shaking slightly as the door slammed shut behind him. He could hear the muffled sounds of voices from the other side of the walls. But none of them made him feel safe. His career, his reputation, everything he had built over the years was slipping through his fingers. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. He tried to keep his calm, telling himself it would blow over. Maybe, just maybe, if he explained himself, things would go back to normal. But then the phone rang, shattering his thoughts. It was a direct line to Lauren Mitchell, and the sound of her voice only confirmed his worst fears. "Don't think for a second that this will be forgotten," she said, her voice cold and unyielding. "I won't let this go. And neither will anyone here. This is bigger than you, Carter. Much bigger. The city needs to know what happened today." Carter swallowed hard. The panic creeping up his spine was inescapable now. His mind raced as he realized the full extent of his mistake. He had thought he was untouchable, that his years of service and the power he wielded as a veteran officer would protect him. But Lauren had pulled the rug out from under him. And now there was no escape. As the phone call ended, Carter was left alone in the interrogation room. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. The door opened, and a senior internal affairs officer walked in. His expression stern. "You're done, Carter. You'll be facing charges for misconduct. And possibly worse. You've been caught. And there's nowhere to hide now." Carter's stomach dropped. He had thought his position was secure. He had thought his colleagues would cover for him. But now, he understood that the game had changed. Lauren Mitchell was not someone to be intimidated. She was a force to be reckoned with. And she wasn't about to let him, or anyone like him, get away with their abuse of power. Meanwhile, outside the building, news of the incident began to spread like wildfire. What had started as a routine traffic stop had now become a full-blown scandal. The press swarmed around the building, eager for any scrap of information they could get. Journalists and cameramen crowded the entrance, shouting questions at the officers and trying to get a glimpse of the accused officer. Lauren, as always, remained calm and composed. She had anticipated the media frenzy, and she knew exactly how to handle it. This wasn't just about one corrupt officer. It was about the larger system. The network of corruption that had allowed officers like Carter to abuse their power without consequence. She had already begun her investigation, and she knew that this was only the beginning. But as Lauren walked through the sea of reporters, her mind raced. She had just exposed one officer, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was at play. Carter wasn't the only bad apple. He was just the one who had made the mistake of crossing her path. The truth, Lauren knew, was much more sinister than anyone could have imagined. As the chaos unfolded in the streets, Lauren prepared for the next phase of her plan. The case against Carter was only the tip of the iceberg. She had already started digging deeper into the police force. And with every passing hour, more and more pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. What had seemed like a single, isolated incident was beginning to reveal a pattern of corruption that stretched all the way to the top. But the deeper she dug, the more dangerous things became. Lauren knew that she was now in the crosshairs of those who had the power to protect their own. As she continued her investigation, she would face new challenges, new threats, and an ever-growing sense of danger. But Lauren Mitchell wasn't someone who backed down. She had made it this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. As she returned to her office, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an anonymous source within Internal Affairs. It contained a single, cryptic line, "This goes much deeper than you think." Lauren stared at the message for a long moment. A sense of unease settling over her. She had known this was bigger than one officer. But now she understood just how deep the corruption ran. It was time to take the gloves off. She had a long fight ahead of her. And she was ready to face whatever came next. Lauren couldn't stop thinking about the message she received from the anonymous source. Everything seemed to be growing more complicated. Just a few hours ago, she believed that Jason Carter's arrest was only the beginning of a larger campaign to clean up the system. But now, she knew there was something much deeper at play. And she had to act quickly to uncover the dangers lurking around her. While the scandal surrounding Carter was shaking the public, Lauren had begun digging into the data she had gathered. She knew this wasn't just about a single corrupt officer, it was about a larger network, involving powerful figures both in the police force and within the government. Every record, every leaked call, and every stolen document was a piece of a puzzle that she needed to complete. However, Lauren also knew that the deeper she dug, the more dangerous things would become. She could feel the eyes of her colleagues in Internal Affairs on her. And not all of them were allies. Some within the department may have been bought off or were aligned with the corrupt. Every decision she made could change not only her life but also the lives of those around her. A day after Carter's arrest, Lauren received a call she would never forget. On the other end of the line was a calm, ominous voice. She recognized it immediately as the head of the city's police force. Colonel Samuel Briggs. He was never one to miss an opportunity to assert his power. And this call was far from a friendly warning. "What do you think you're doing, Lauren?" Briggs asked in a measured tone. But his voice held a subtle threat. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. You are poking at an empire you have no chance of breaking." Lauren wasn't scared, but she understood this conversation wasn't going to end easily. "This empire is guilty, Samuel, and I won't stop until everyone involved is held accountable," she responded firmly, without hesitation. On the other end, Briggs let out a cold laugh. "You can try, but don't think it'll be easy. I can protect the ones who need protecting. You won't win this." After that call, Lauren felt the situation becoming more dangerous. Briggs was likely the mastermind behind it all, the man who had been pulling the strings in these shady operations. And now she realized that if she didn't have enough evidence to take him down, everything she had done would have been for nothing. Lauren continued her investigation, collecting evidence and slowly uncovering a series of leaked documents. These documents contained recordings of phone calls between police officers and high-ranking officials, revealing their involvement in weapons trafficking, corruption, and even murder to silence witnesses. One late evening, while Lauren was reviewing documents in her office, her phone buzzed. It was another unknown call. No name displayed, just a number she didn't recognize. Lauren answered, and the voice on the other end was chillingly unfamiliar. "You've gone too far, Lauren. If you keep going, we won't let you live in peace," the voice warned, low and ominous. Lauren wasn't intimidated, but a sense of unease swept over her. She hung up, but she couldn't shake the feeling that danger was closing in. She knew she couldn't back down. If she didn't continue with this investigation, many more people would suffer from the corruption and violence of those in power. She had no choice but to keep going. She pressed on with her work, unearthing more information about Briggs and his accomplices. With each new piece of the puzzle, the picture of corruption within the police and government grew clearer. And Lauren began to realize something she hadn't considered before. These people weren't just corrupt officers. They were part of a much darker network that had long existed within the system. One afternoon, as Lauren was driving home, she suddenly noticed she was being followed. At first, it was a single car behind her. Then another appeared, trailing her as well. She could feel the tension rising as she drove through the quiet streets. Realizing she was being cornered, then, without warning, her car was attacked. A barrage of gunshots rang out, shattering the windows. Lauren panicked, but by some miracle, she wasn't injured. After the incident, Lauren knew that this fight wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about protecting her own life. And she was ready to fight to the end, no matter the danger. The days after the shooting were a blur for Lauren. Despite the close call, she had not wavered in her determination. But the danger was palpable now, closing in on her from all sides. She couldn't ignore the fact that her investigation was becoming more than just a battle against corruption, it was a war against an entire system. And the forces involved were willing to stop at nothing to protect themselves. Lauren had always known that taking on the city's most powerful figures was never going to be easy. But now she realized how far-reaching their influence went. Every document she uncovered, every phone call she intercepted, revealed a darker and deeper web of corruption. The people she was dealing with weren't just criminals, they were the very fabric of the city's power structure. With the information she had gathered, Lauren was starting to connect the dots. She knew that the trail led directly to Colonel Samuel Briggs, the man who had threatened her life. But she also discovered something even more alarming. Briggs wasn't working alone. His operations had the support of key political figures, business tycoons, and, most disturbingly, members of the city's judicial system. The corruption ran so deep that it was almost impossible to tell where it began and where it ended. One evening, while Lauren was reviewing a pile of confidential documents in her apartment, her phone rang. It was from a number she didn't recognize. A feeling of dread washed over her. But she answered anyway. Lauren, came a voice she immediately recognized. Carlos. Her former assistant. We need to meet. Now. Carlos had been one of the few people Lauren trusted throughout her career. He was intelligent, resourceful, and loyal. But lately, she had begun to sense that something was off. The urgency in his voice only confirmed her suspicions. Where? She asked, her voice tense. I'll send you the location. It's important. Be careful. Lauren's heart raced as she hung up the phone. She had no idea what Carlos wanted. But she knew she had no choice but to go. He had been a part of her investigation. And if he had new information, it could be the key to taking down the corrupt officials once and for all. When she arrived at the address Carlos had given her, it was a quiet, secluded building on the outskirts of the city. Lauren parked her car at a distance, scanning the area to make sure she wasn't being followed. Her senses were on high alert, and every passing car made her heart skip a beat. She made her way into the building, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Carlos was waiting for her in a small, dimly lit room. The look on his face told Lauren that something was terribly wrong. What's going on, Carlos? Lauren asked, trying to mask the anxiety creeping into her voice. Carlos hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. Lauren, I've been working with someone inside the department. They've been helping us, feeding us information, but I've learned something that changes everything. Lauren frowned. What is it? What have you found? Carlos paused again before leaning in closer. Briggs, he's not just involved in the corruption. He's the one running the whole operation. And I've learned that he's planning something big, something that could destroy everything we've worked for. He's making his move soon. And I don't think we'll be able to stop him. Lauren's mind raced. Briggs had been a formidable opponent. But if he was planning something more dangerous, They needed to act quickly. She couldn't afford to let him make his next move. I need proof. Carlos, we need to know exactly what he's planning, she said, her voice hard with determination. If we're going to take him down, we need everything. Carlos nodded, looking around cautiously before pulling out a flash drive from his pocket. I've got it. This is the smoking gun. It's all the evidence we need: emails, phone records, financial transactions, everything. Lauren took the flash drive from Carlos, her fingers trembling slightly as she realized what this meant. This was it, the key to bringing down Briggs and everyone involved in his web of corruption. But just as she was about to leave, Carlos stopped her. Lauren, you need to be careful. They know we're getting close. There's a mole in internal affairs. I don't know who, but someone's been feeding them information about your movements. You're not safe. Lauren's heart sank. A mole inside her own team? It was a devastating blow. But she couldn't afford to dwell on it. They were already too deep into this fight to turn back now. I'll be careful, Lauren replied, her voice cold with resolve. But we're not backing down. We're going to expose all of them. As Lauren left the building, she felt the weight of what was to come pressing down on her. The game had changed. The forces she was up against were more powerful than she had ever imagined. But she also knew that the evidence she now had was the key to dismantling their entire operation. She wasn't sure how much time she had left. But one thing was certain: if Briggs thought he could stop her, he was in for a rude awakening. The war had only just begun, and Lauren was prepared to see it through to the end. Lauren stood in front of her office door, the feeling of anxiety rising as she stared at the flash drive Carlos had given her. Everything she had done, every piece of evidence she had collected, now depended on what she was going to do with this information. Everything she had been through up until now was just part of the battle. She knew she had to face the most dangerous and powerful figures in the system. She turned back to her desk and plugged the flash drive into her computer. The screen lit up with a series of documents and emails. Each line of text, each note made the truth she had been searching for clearer. Big names, corrupt politicians, high-ranking police officers, all of them appeared in these documents. This was the strongest evidence she needed to expose the entire network of corruption. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was Carlos. She immediately answered. Lauren, they know. Everything's been exposed. Carlos's voice was shaking, full of panic. Lauren gripped the phone tightly. Who are they? Who leaked it? Carlos didn't answer immediately. He paused, then spoke in a low voice. I don't know, but I overheard a call. Briggs found out we're getting close to the target. They're going to make their move soon. Carlos's warning hit Lauren like a bolt of lightning. If Briggs knew, time was running out. Her safety and everyone around her were now in the highest danger. But Lauren couldn't stop. It was too late to pull back. She couldn't back down now, even knowing that everything was about to get much worse. Lauren started to make plans. She needed to release this information to the public. And she needed to do it quickly, before Briggs could act. But to do that, she needed more than just evidence. She needed support from those who could stand up against the system, people who still had some integrity and loyalty. She reached out to a group of investigative journalists she trusted. These people could help her expose the story. But at the same time, she knew that involving them would put them in grave danger. They would not only become targets of the corrupt officers but also of anyone willing to do anything to keep the truth hidden. The next morning, Lauren and the journalists made arrangements for a public press conference, where she would reveal the entire set of evidence she had gathered. Meanwhile, she continued working with allies in the police department, those who still had loyalty, to prepare for what was coming. She couldn't do this alone. To take down Briggs and his accomplices, she would need all the help she could get. At the scheduled time, the press conference began. Lauren stood before a sea of reporters, the camera flashes blinding her. She could feel the tension in the air. Every eye in the room was on her. Today, she wasn't just a judge, she was the one standing up against a massive corrupt system. With steady resolve, Lauren began revealing the evidence. Document by document, email by email, the exchanges between officials, the phone calls, and the shady financial transactions involving Briggs and his accomplices. Everything was laid bare for the world to see. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Lauren couldn't look back now, because she knew that if Briggs and his cronies could stop her, they would do everything in their power to silence the truth. But Lauren stood firm. She knew that this was the only chance to bring them down. She couldn't back away now. Suddenly, there was a loud noise outside the press room. Everyone turned to look, uneasy. A few reporters stood up, staring at their phone screens, murmuring to one another. Lauren sensed something wasn't right. "We just got word. There's an attack happening at the Internal Affairs office," one of the reporters shouted. Lauren's spine went cold. Everything she had done, all the sacrifices, were now being put to the test. Briggs wasn't just trying to stop her, he was trying to drive her to despair. But Lauren knew that this was the moment of truth. This was the time to make her stand. If not now, then when? The battle was far from over. But Lauren was ready to face whatever came next. The truth would win. The press conference room erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted at one another. Cameras flashed, and Lauren could feel the weight of the moment press down on her. The truth was out, but now she had to fight to protect it. The moment she revealed the extent of Briggs's corruption, everything changed. The corrupt officers, politicians, and business tycoons tied to the operation would stop at nothing to silence her. She knew she had just painted a massive target on her back. But there was no turning back now. Lauren glanced toward the entrance of the room as security personnel started moving toward the doors. She could hear the distant wail of sirens. This wasn't just about taking down Briggs anymore, it was about survival. Behind the chaos, Lauren kept her composure, focusing on the bigger picture. The data she had released was out there now. There was no erasing it. No going back. The battle was shifting from the courtroom to the streets. From internal corruption to public accountability. She needed to make sure it stayed that way. But even as the press scrambled to cover the story, a cold realization gripped her. The threat had never just been Briggs. There were others, powers far higher. People who had been complicit in this corruption for years. People who didn't plan to lose their hold on the city. And they wouldn't let it go down without a fight. Lauren was ushered out of the room by her team. But she knew the real battle was just beginning. A car was waiting for her. And she got in quickly. Glancing at the reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face was resolute. But the fear was real. If she thought the danger was over, she was wrong. Now, those who were exposed would come after her with everything they had. "Where to?" her driver asked, glancing nervously in the rearview mirror. "We need to get to Internal Affairs," Lauren said, her voice low. She had to see this through. She couldn't let them bury this. She couldn't let the corruption win. As the car sped through the city, Lauren's mind raced. She had done everything right. But she knew that even the most foolproof plan could fall apart at any moment. The corrupt system had deep roots. And now she was caught in the middle of it. What if Internal Affairs had already been compromised? What if there was a mole in their ranks too? Lauren shook the thought from her mind. She couldn't afford to think like that. She had to stay focused. The evidence was public now. The people knew the truth. The rest would follow. When the car arrived at Internal Affairs, Lauren was greeted by a tense scene. Officers were on edge, and she could feel the hostility in the air. This was no longer just about policing, this was about power. She was walking into a hornet's nest, but she wasn't about to back down. Walking into the building, Lauren was met with a chilling silence. A few familiar faces were there, people she'd worked with for years. And a few she didn't recognize. Everyone seemed to be watching her as if waiting for something to happen. The tension was thick. Lauren could feel it. There was a traitor in the room. Then, suddenly, the door slammed open. It was Briggs. He stood in the doorway, flanked by a few officers. His presence alone was enough to send a shiver down Lauren's spine. But she didn't flinch. She wasn't afraid of him. She had come too far to turn back now. So, you think you've won, huh? Briggs's voice was cold, mocking. You think you can expose all of us and just walk away? Lauren stood tall, her gaze unwavering. No, Briggs, this is just the beginning. The truth is out, and there's no turning back now. You can't silence it. Briggs took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. You're out of your league. Lauren, you have no idea what you're up against. Lauren didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, steeling herself. The people will know. They already do. You can't stop them. For a moment, the room was quiet. Then, Briggs's face twisted into a smile. But there was nothing friendly about it. We'll see about that, he hissed. Before anyone could react, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder outside the building. The doors opened, and a group of officers entered, followed by reporters and news cameras. The news had spread faster than even Lauren had anticipated. The public was out for blood, and Briggs could no longer hide. As Briggs's face twisted with panic, Lauren moved to the front of the room, her voice strong. The people deserve justice, and no matter how many times you try to silence us, we will keep fighting. The officers who had remained loyal to Lauren moved in, surrounding Briggs and his corrupt allies. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and for the first time, they realized that the walls they had built for so long were crumbling. Briggs tried to make a run for it, but he was quickly apprehended. As he was handcuffed and dragged away, Lauren watched, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment she had worked for, fought for. Briggs, the mastermind behind the corruption, was finally going to face justice. As Briggs was led away, a sense of relief washed over Lauren. But she knew the fight wasn't truly over. This was just one battle in a much larger war. But for now, the city had seen the light. The corrupt system had been exposed. And Lauren had won. With Briggs taken into custody, the media storm erupted again. This time, it was different. The people had seen the truth, and they wouldn't let it go. Lauren, though exhausted, stood tall. She had taken down the system that had ruled the city for so long. But she knew there would be more to come. More battles to fight, more truth to uncover, and she was ready.